Salutations everybody, it is Matty here with my late but necessary review for God of War. After around 40 hours, I completed the game and obtained my Platinum Trophy. This time around we're going to be doing things differently. Since it's a few weeks after launch, I want this review to be spoiler filled. Part of the reason for that is I feel with this title it's hard to punctuate what moments make this game so great without being able to show them in context. So if you have yet to complete God of War, please make sure you click off this video and return at a later date, as I will be discussing most of the important plot pieces from start to finish. So spoiler warning. Now that you have been properly warned, let's get into it. There are certain moments right off the bat in God of War that are engulfed in a strangeness if you've played previous titles in the series. Kratos is quietly cutting down a log. There isn't any loud, epic music. It's oddly peaceful. Soon after finding out that all of your actions are for your deceased wife, Faye, I was concerned that God of War may be using the family trope to reel us in without really knowing who his wife was. Fortunately, that ends up being one of the big reveals, but at the time, I wasn't invested to be truthful. A lot of the initial impressions of the game said that the first few hours were out of this world, but a lot of this stuff I had seen before. In my opinion, it's not until after the initial couple of hours and your first encounter with the stranger that I was like, alright God of War, I see you. So if you were like me, read those impressions and were expecting something like The Last of Us where the first 30 minutes were enough to sell the entire game, I didn't find that here. With that said, God of War's first boss fight was cinematic, intense, and delivered the true sensation of two gods duking it out. Moments like using a strong attack and sending the stranger tumbling through trees were minor details that would sell the whole scene. After this boss fight, Atreus and Kratos are forced to begin their journey to the highest peak in the realm a lot earlier than expected, since they are now being hunted for unknown reasons. I was wholeheartedly impressed that this game looked so damn good and can still handle all of the action that was taking place. Not only that, but there isn't a single loading screen outside of when you first load your game. This game is a technical masterpiece, and even gamers who don't care about graphics like myself will find themselves pausing multiple times to take in the view. Kratos' character model has to be the best I've ever seen in a video game. You see his whole story on his body from previous games, accounting for the major scars and cuts received in those battles. The shape of his arms, the frost cut in his beard, the constant scowl. Don't get me wrong though, Kratos isn't only great to look at from a technical standpoint, he's finally a Kratos worth caring about. In this game, we get a good look at a Kratos raising a god of his own, trying to atone for all he's done, and using his experience from previous games for good. You can detect the emotional barriers he has put up around him, where he doesn't even treat Atreus as his own son. Seeing their relationship develop is marvelous. Kratos goes from being barely able to rest his hand on Atreus' shoulder to actually embracing him and loving him for who he is. My personal takeaway was a lot of Kratos' reluctance to love his son came from his struggle with trusting gods in the past and him trying to protect Atreus from how gods always become. The emotional confliction surrounding the many scuffles between the two made for a big payoff later in the game that actually felt good when they were on the same page. Don't let Kratos steal the limelight though, as seeing Atreus develop is arguably more interesting. The way he lets being a god get to his head, the childish antics, the occasional recklessness, yet determination to learn and be impactful on this journey and prove to his father he's ready, he embodies so much of what it is like to grow up in the harsh realities that at times come with it. By the end of the game, Atreus is a totally different person from the kid you met in the beginning. Characters as a whole are actually very good in this game. There actually aren't any that are bad in this game now that I think about it, and that's a remarkable achievement. From Kratos and Atreus to Freya, the villains, the dwarves, and Mimir, the game excels on all fronts with giving you a cast that is well acted and worth giving a damn about. A big part of this is due to how they are introduced and their respective impacts. Freya feels like the mother you never meet in the game. The dwarves bring some comedic relief, as does Mimir in his interactions with Kratos as their polar opposites, but I also feel that Mimir serves as an excellent storyteller to help build out the world. Everyone feeds off each other in one way or another, and then we're left with a situation where it's one of the best casts you could find in a video game. The open world in God of War is a direct representation of how the entire game is. After certain stages in the story, the water level surrounding Tyr's temple lowers, and the game opens up even more, allowing new areas to discover, treasure to plunder, and enemies to decimate. Granted, the open world serves more as a hub in my opinion, but the way it is constructed, sort of like an onion that it has layer after layer, is so impressive to me. There are side quests that Kratos can embark on, like freeing dragons or doing favors for spirits, and I instantly found myself upon doing these thinking, why would a guy like Kratos give a flying shit about helping anyone here? Until the game, as per usual, provided narrative reasoning behind the gameplay decisions. Kratos claimed the reason he's partaking in these activities is because he wants new equipment and nothing more. While it's small and some may not care what Kratos' reasoning was, I am so happy that Santa Monica Studio included that small bit there, because it took me from playing Kratos' journey to my own, which is what I believe the devs were trying to avoid. The narrative connection continued on to important gameplay mechanics like fast travel and switching realms, which I also appreciated because while it's just a pet peeve, I can't stand when games toss their immersion to the wind when a gameplay mechanic doesn't line up with the story being told. Here it does, and it's powerful. It also works with Mimir being an all-knowing god and telling stories on the boat about other gods within the Norse mythology to help flesh out things for the player, but also doing it in a way that makes sense. The only retconning that I felt was done was allowing the dwarves to travel dimensions on their own, just so that they could be in convenient places for the player to craft and upgrade items. Speaking of, most of you closely following the channel know my ass was concerned about this part. I found it strange that RPG mechanics made their way into God of War, especially with the accompanied idea of creating, quote, different builds, end quote, of Kratos, and quite frankly, I still find it a little odd, but that's just me being stubborn. First off, I am so blown away by how many models there are for the armor in this game and how damn good it looks. Not only that, but each piece of armor has unique buffs, making them fun to experiment with on top of the enchantments that you can socket into your armor to further customize your Kratos. While at the end of the game, I feel most of us will have the same super-powered Kratos with the same skills and the same armor, we may end up with slightly different enchantments. You can also level Kratos up by spending XP earned in battle. These skills unlock new moves that highlight just how deep the combat system can be, from dodging attacks to combo extension knockups, or even abilities for Atreus, who is a natural extension of the combat itself. Just when I was getting tired of the Leviathan axe, they bring back the Blades of Chaos in one of the best ways imaginable, not just in the terms of story execution, but mainly in the gameplay. In previous God of War games, you'd fight off hordes of enemies with these blades, and the new one, you'll find yourself being a lot more strategic with things. When the Blades of Chaos return, it is a huge horde of enemies that you can hack to bits without a second thought, and while minor, I appreciated that transformation back to an older time. God of War's highest moments come from its main stories. After approximately 40 hours with the game, the payoff at the end where you spread phase ashes is one of the most emotionally rich moments that a game has offered in recent memory. It felt like with all the gradual buildup as the game brought in characters, new realms, enemies, that the time was right to conclude the adventure. It was peaceful and it made me smile. The reveal that Atreus' real name was Loki likely includes some foreshadowing, as we don't see a sniff of Thor or Odin in the game aside from the secret ending, but considering in Norse mythology that Loki kills both of them, I get a feeling I know where Santa Monica is going next. Speaking of Norse mythology, that's something I really wanted to touch on. While knowing Kratos' story is important to feel a true sense of impact, I also feel some familiarity with gods in the Norse mythology is important to have moments big and small be impactful. My interest in mythology stems from the absolutely disgusting amount of time I sink into Smite on a near nightly basis. Thanks to my familiarity with the gods, learning about the witch in the woods being Freya was a real neat revelation that I don't think will have as much impact if you don't know anything about her. Or when I discovered Fafnir captured in his dragon form. It was side content, but it was instantly more intriguing to free him once I learned his identity. Familiarity with the Norse mythology is also helpful in the main story, as you'll hear these passing tales of characters, and it may glance off you if you don't already have some base knowledge. Or you may not be instantly gripped because you'll hear tales about certain gods like Odin, and a lot of the intrigue can actually stem from the contrast of what you actually know about Odin versus what this game's story is trying to tell. Truthfully speaking, God of War only has one weak aspect, and that is Niflheim. This area is dangerously similar to the Chalice dungeons in Bloodborne, where players go for unlimited content and farming. As echoed throughout my review, I loved the thought that went into every nook and cranny for this game. I obtained the Platinum Trophy for this game, and this was the only aspect that detracted from my experience. It just simply wasn't fun, even if the game sports excellent combat. The other piece of side content offered is in a realm called Muspelheim, which offers players unique challenges to take on. I personally found this enjoyable, considering it added to the combat instead of solely relying on it like in Niflheim. Ultimately, God of War is well worth the dive. If you haven't played the previous titles, just watch a summary, Google some popular Norse gods, and dive in. This is easily my game of the year so far, but first, some thoughts on the whole discussion going on surrounding that. Since my review is late, I have had some time to digest this experience and see others' thoughts. A common theme surrounding God of War is that it has saved gaming for many out there. I find that excellent for those who were struggling with burnout, as I have been there before, and some people just need that game to feel resurrected. There are two reasons I bring this up. One, if you are struggling with burnout in gaming, this may be your title. Number two, this game did not have that impact on me, as I'm not really suffering burnout right now, but also as I look ahead in the year at games I've truly been anticipating, I do see the potential of God of War being beat for my game of the year, but I guarantee it sits in my top 10. So that is all I have to say on God of War. From start to finish, it is a wonderful journey, 40 hours well spent, and I'm going to find some random game on the opposite end of the spectrum to dive into for the time being. The reason for that is because God of War was so good that I think even if I play something good afterwards, it's just going to dull the experience for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on God of War. If you have any questions for me in the comments down below, fire away, and I will catch you guys next time. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that, as it fuels all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.